Hello and welcome to this painting of a bouquet of peony flowers. We're going to get started by grabbing our largest brush. We're going to take some blue and some white and mix it together to make a light blue. And I like to start off by just putting some white on the canvas right away and then adding blue over top. And then we get that light blue right there by mixing it right on the canvas and then adding some white over top to make it even lighter. And I'm doing back and forth and kind of stroke patterns that are all over the place. I'm going in every which direction to give this background a bit more of a textured look. I got a little bit of yellow there into my brush by accident. That's why there's a little bit of green that was left over, but just keep going with the blue and the white until you finish off the canvas. If you want lighter blue, you can add in some more white. If you want a little bit of a darker blue, just add in some more blue over top and just keep going back and forth in every which direction to get more of a textured look to your background. Once you filled in your background with that light blue, you're going to dip your paintbrush a little bit in the red paint, and then you're going to take some off with your paper towel because you don't need very much on your brush at all. But you just want to dip it a tiny bit in the red, and you're going to do the same kind of stroke pattern you just did with the blue and the white. And we're going to get a bit of a reddish tinge to the areas of the background of our peony painting. We just kind of want it to be an abstract type background, but I don't need very much red on my brush at all, and it might turn into a little bit of a purplish type red because of its mixing in with the blue. But I'm just going back and forth. It's kind of all over the place, but it's just random. I don't want it everywhere. I just want it randomly splattered throughout the background. And if you end up having too much red, just take some white, go over top, or take some blue and go over top as well. And then you can smooth it out by using that flat part of your brush and just smoothing out and blending it into the background. So once your background's complete and it's dry, you're going to take your angled brush. You're going to mix some blue and some yellow together to make green. And using that side angle of my brush and very light on my brush, I'm doing upward strokes to make those grass-like figures that are going to be in our bouquet. So I start from the bottom and I make my way up. And then here I'm just forming a leaf. So I'm doing a few strokes. And then I'm forming a leaf shape, which is a teardrop shape. And then I'm adding in some details of these. So I'm also using the angled part of my brush because that's to form the shape. And then I can use the flat side of my brush to fill it in green. So do the best you can with a leaf. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but I have 3 type figures here, both kind of in triangle teardrop shapes. They don't have to be as big as mine, and you can make them a little bit swirly as long as you're using the angle of your brush, and you don't need to put a lot of pressure on your brush either when you're forming these leaves, because the less pressure you have, the thinner your lines are going to be. And for fine detail work, it's important to use a little bit of paint, less pressure, and you'll get finer details. And then you can add a little bit more pressure when you're filling it in. And here I filled the leaf in just with the green paint, and then I added some white over top of my brush to add a little bit of lightness into some of the greenery. And now I'm adding in more sprigs of grass now that I have a few leaves put in. I'm thickening it up here by using that flat part of my brush. And this is just the beginning of your painting. This is the background leaves. A lot of these are going to be covered up with our flowers. So all this hard work just to have a lot of it covered up. But it's to add in the depth and the detail into our paintings. So add in as much greenery into the background. Add in as much detail as you want into this greenery. Here I'm adding in even more white to lighten it off. And if you're wanting it to stay dark, add in some more green by adding in that blue and that yellow. And if you want a darker blue or a darker green, you're going to add in more blue. And if you want a lighter green, you're going to add in more yellow. And then you can always add white to make it a different consistency of green altogether. So add in the greenery as much as you want. I like to have dark and light greens for it to just pop a little bit more, and it looks really realistic and really pretty when you have different shades of green throughout. So I'm going to have darker, I'm going to have lighter, where I'm just having the straight up blue and yellow mix, and then I'm going to have ones where I have the white mixed in as well. So now we're starting that first peony, so make sure your brush is cleaned off and dried off really well. And you're just going to form bubble shapes, forming just a big round mound of red in the middle. So you can start off with a circle, but then I like to make some mounds at the top, just forming a big red blob. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and then you're going to kind of form its shape. So the bottom part is basically just an oval shape, and then the top part has a little bit of a mound. And then once it's filled in red, you're going to dip your brush in the white without washing it off. And you're going to start putting strokes of an upward pattern and also downward as you make your way around, doing quick strokes, forming those petals. So using that flat part of your angle brush, you're just swishing your brush downward, and then when you're at the top of your flower, you're doing the same thing, the same strokes, but you want to make sure it's going around in that circle. But we're going to be adding lots more detail into this flower. So this is just the base of it. So if you're finding it's looking a little bit funky, that's fine. It's supposed to look a little bit funky. It's the details we add in as we go that's going to be forming our flower. So this is just where you're adding in those petals. So I'm adding in some white, some lightness. So I have that big petal in the middle, and then I have some little petals forming that big petal there, and then I have the little petals kind of swarming around it, using that flat part of my angle brush. And I'm also really light on my brush, and I'm not using very much paint at all. And if I'm finding that there's areas that I put too much white, just dip it back in the red and go over that white to darken it up a little bit. And remember to step back from your canvas as well. Take a look from far away and see if your petals are going the right way, how you want to add to them. If you're too close to your painting, you're never going to be able to tell what you want to add, what you want to change. But when you step back, you can see how your painting is actually progressing. And then I like to add little petals coming off, forming it and making the flower just a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to add some more white into my petals now. And notice how I didn't dip my brush a whole lot, and I'm nice and light on my brush, and the paint is laying on top really nicely. The lighter you are on your brush, the nicer your paint is going to lay on top of that other paint, even if it's wet. It's going to blend in, but it's also going to lay on top, so it's going to lighten up exactly how you want it to. So I'm using that flat part of my brush, and I'm just kind of whisking down. And now I dipped it in the red just to add in a little bit extra detail into that flower, into that petal. Because I like to have where my flower is a little bit darker in some areas and a little bit lighter in some areas. That's how most flowers and peonies are shaped like. They have different textures of colors throughout them. So I'm going to leave that flower for now and let it dry a little bit. And I'm going to move on to my next one, which is a little bit higher up. I'm mixing some white and some red together again, same color. And I'm doing, using that flat part of my brush, but then moving back to my angle part so I get some skinnier strokes. And I'm making it go up so it's facing kind of an upward shape motion instead of how it's opening up with the other one. This one is a little bit more closed and just on a different angle. So I'm painting, making the petals go up towards the top of my canvas. And I added in some more white because I wanted that one to be a little bit lighter, and then some red over top. Adding in some more depth into my painting. Really using that flat part of my angle brush. and leaving it for now and letting it dry so I can add in some more details in a bit. So then I'm going to take my rounded end brush, using the same white and red mixture for the pink. I'm making a little peak at the top and I'm forming a lupin shape. So it's a peak at the top and then doing dabbing motions, making my way down. Almost looks like a feather. So I'm using my rounded end brush, and they're pretty quick strokes as long as they're going up towards the top of the canvas. And these flowers are the ones that I'm just kind of tucking in behind, and I can add white over top, some of them to make them more pink. But these are the ones that are there to fill in the bouquet and make it look really full. So I'm just sticking in some of these lupins in the background. So it's just a little peak, and as you make your way down, you widen it a little bit. So I make a dash with my round end brush for the top, and then I make diagonal lines going all the way down, close together, making them go down towards the bottom of the canvas, but they're facing the top of the canvas. So as long as your petals are facing going up to the top, but they're in a diagonal shape, they're thickening off as they're making their way to the bottom of the canvas, but the flower should be going towards the top of the canvas, because flowers always grow up and petals always grow up. Just make them really full. And it's just a quick stroke pattern, making your way down. And you can do as many of these as you want, filling in the gaps. And then we're also going to add in some white peonies, doing the exact same technique we just did with our pink ones, but you're going to do it in white, and then I'm going to show you the details. So you can put in some white ones in between those two pink ones, and then I'll show you how to add in the detail work. You can add in the white ones the same way you did the first one or the second one, whichever way you prefer. But first, we're going to take our angle brush and we're going to add in a few more details into our pink peony at the top after we have the amount of lupins we want right now. And we're just adding in some more white layered petals. But they're not really white. They're like light pink because it's mixed in with the red. So I'm adding in some extra petals, kind of gliding along the bottom. And don't get frustrated. Flowers are hard at first, so this is all just a learning process. So remember to hit pause and watch how my brush is going. Watch how my brush is swirling around the edge, using that flat part and then the angle part to fill it in, and then using the flat part to soften off some of the paint and to blend it in. So here I'm just touching up my flowers, adding in the white where I'm wanting it, and stepping back from my canvas and also seeing where I want to add in my petals and do my final touch-ups before I add in and wash that brush off and add in my white peonies. So you washed off your brush and you dried it off, and then you added in those white peonies as best as you can. Same technique you just did with the pink ones. And then I'm sticking in some pink lupins again in the background and in between some of my white ones, because now that I have my white flowers formed, I'm still going to be adding in details to them, but I'm waiting till that white dries a little bit more. So I'm taking that opportunity and I'm adding in some more lupins where I'm wanting them. So I'm doing here I'm doing a little bit darker ones. And then I can add in white and make lighter ones. So stick in those lupins wherever you want to fill it up, and as your peonies are drying, and we can add in some more details. Okay, so I have the amount of lupins I want for now. I can always add in more later. I'm going to start adding in more details into my white flowers if they're dry enough. So I want these ones to be really popping white. So I'm laying the same technique. I'm using that flat part of my brush and I'm going around in a circle, adding in those petals. Some areas might still be a little bit wet, but that's okay. And for the white ones, you're going to add in as many of those stroke marks as you can. So I'm going around. Some of my petals are shorter than others, which is going to add in some more depth. But with the white, we're going to be adding in a little bit extra small details, like little centers to our flowers and stuff like that. That's really going to make these ones pop. So without washing our brush, we're going to dip it in the yellow paint. And we're going to form a little center with our yellow paint, just adding a dab of yellow right in the middle of our flowers. Remember, you don't need very much paint on your brush. I only dipped it that one time and I was able to make 2 dots for the middle of my flower. And then using that same paint, we don't need to dip it again. We're going to add a little bit of yellow, little kind of strip-like pattern in the middle of our flower up top. And then I'm wiping my brush off a little bit. And then I'm going to wash that brush off and I'm going to dip it a tiny bit in the black paint mixed with white paint to make that gray. And I'm very light on my brush. I don't need very much of this paint at all. Notice that I didn't dip my brush anymore. And because we want to do this while that white is still wet. And I'm just adding a little bit of gray into my flowers along parts of the petals. And this will make sense later on because this is going to add a little bit of depth into our flower. Then we're going to add more white petals over top when that dries a little bit. But we want this to have a little bit of a darker tinge to the bottom layer of our flower. And you're going to do that to both of those flowers, adding in, and if you find you added in a little bit too much black, just take some white and soften it and make it into that gray. So I'm just adding in some gray into that flower. And I'm adding a little bit of a black dot into the middle as well. Just a tiny black dot. Again, I'm going to be softening this up a little bit later on. But right now I'm just adding in this black dot into the middle of my flower. And the other 2 flowers are probably dry enough now that if you're wanting to add in more details, you can. I'm going to soften off some of my gray a little bit on areas here that I thought I put in too much. So I'm taking some white. I'm using that flat part of my angled brush. I'm softening it out. And I'm going to do the same to the other one. And then while I'm waiting for my gray to dry and to finish off my white flowers, I'm going to add in more details into my pink flowers. I'm going to add in some more lupins while I'm waiting for everything to dry. So that's a trick that if you're really wanting to finish off flowers, but you're getting a little bit impatient because you're waiting for this next step to dry, just move on to another step for a second. Add in some more greenery, add in some more lupins, add more details into your other flowers while you're waiting for that flower to dry. So right now I'm adding in some more greenery. I'm going to do some light greens and I'm going to do strips of greens. And then I'm also going to add in some more lupins and I'm going to add in some more details into my pink flowers. So now I want to really soften up that white flower. So I took some white paint again and I'm using the flat part of my angled brush and I'm smoothing out with that white. I'm smoothing out that middle part that I did with the yellow. So I'm having now some yellow into my flower as well as the black dot because I didn't really love the way the center was looking. So I'm just smoothing that out, but it's going to add in some detail into my flower because I like that the peony now has different layers into it and also has some yellow mixed in with it. And then again, I'm going to wait for it to dry just a little bit. And it's great that acrylic paint dries really fast because you don't have to wait very long, but you can move on to another step in between. So now I'm just going to go back to my greenery and I'm going to form another couple leaves right at the bottom with that rounded end brush. I'm going to make some bigger leaves. So I like to take my brush and glide it up. And notice that I didn't leave my canvas. I just did a swirl-like motion, light on my brush, and made my way up to give some detail into that leaf.
So it's almost like a teardrop with a teardrop shape with a little bit of a swirl into it. Then I'm taking some black, little tiny bit of black. I don't need very much. And I'm adding in some darkness into that greenery, just a darker green. And I'm smoothing it out. And I add in as well some black little stems underneath too, and it really makes them pop. And then I'm adding in some white just to smooth out that green and blending it in. So again, don't use very much paint. Less is more when you're doing these fine details. You don't want the other paint to overtake your paint. So if you're using too much paint, the black is just going to overtake or the white is just going to overtake. And nice smooth stroke motions and your paint will blend a lot nicer. I'm doing nice smooth, and right there I probably used a little bit too much paint, but a little bit less on this petal. So just do the adjustments that you want for your greenery, and then we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so the last and final step is to finally make the perfect adjustments to these white flowers. So white seems like it should be the easiest, but there's a little bit more complicated flower because of the extra details you have to put in. So we're just adding in white petals over top now to give it some more depth. We're not going over the whole thing. We don't want all of it to be taken. We just want it to look like petals are kind of laying over top the shadowed areas. And once you're finished of that, you can add in any extra details you want, any extra flowers, greenery, whatever you think. Remember to take a step back away from your canvas and take a look and see what you want to add, what you want to take away, where you want to put in flowers, where you want to add in yellow. And here I'm just adding a little bit of yellow back into the center of my flower. But after you're happy with your painting, you have your very own Peony Bouquet acrylic painting. I hope you enjoyed this, and if there's any paintings that you're really wanting to learn in the future, just message me on my Facebook page and my website, and I can do that up for you as a paint kit and one of these online art classes. And you can also message me and ask me any extra tips or tricks that you might be curious about, and I can answer those questions for you. Also, please rate and review my Facebook page and my website if you enjoyed this painting. Again, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I get to see you again next time. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.